Yeah, in the book too, you also offer a little guidance around how to start to listen to the soul. And so you mentioned a few things, and one of them is like to observe when energy is coming through. Another thing was like the feeling function.
Mhm.
Could you
Yep,
just talk a little bit about those
sure.
indicators when, when
Mhm.
we're listening?
Sure. Let me just mention a kind of silly example, but one that's stuck in my mind. Many, many years ago, I took our dog Shadrach to have some surgery, and he was a big Lhasa who ran our family. And I said to the surgeon when I went to get him, I said, "Well, when can I let him get up and walk around?" And he looked at me like, "What's wrong with you?" He says, "He's a dog. He knows." In other words, he knew what was right for him. Sure enough, he laid around for a couple of days, then he got up and started walking around. I thought, he knows.
Hmm.
We are equipped with elemental systems that are overridden in our reporting to the world around us, one of which is the energy system. We can mobilize our energy. Thank goodness. You need to do that to get up at 2 in the morning and feed that crying baby, or you need to step out of the way of that speeding car, or whatever. But if you keep mobilizing your energy in the wrong direction, it's going to lead to boredom, depression, self medication, burnout, all kinds of things.
Hmm.
So, when you're doing what's right for you, the energy's there, the flow is there, as they talk about it. The energy supports you, and it causes you to put up with all kinds of conflict and suffering because it matters to your own soul. The feeling function. We don't choose our feelings. Feelings are autonomous qualitative analyses of what's happening in our life that happen autonomously. Afterwards, it comes to consciousness. I can dismiss them, disown them, project them onto others, anesthetize them, whatever. But if I pay attention to it, in other words, I can be doing all the right things that my executive core up here thinks is right, but underneath, it never feels right. And when you're doing what's right for you, the feeling is there. Thirdly, we have dreams. Um, we average 6 dreams a night, as sleep research tells us. Everybody's going to say, "Oh, I don't dream that much," or "I don't remember my dreams." Well, that may be true, but we are still dreaming.
Yeah.
And if you stop and pay attention to dreams, over time, you begin to realize there's some other center inside of me, some other locus of knowing that has a perspective that's larger than my conscious perspective, is critiquing my life, has its own agenda, and amazingly is seeking to communicate with me. And wouldn't it make sense once in a while to sort of pay attention to that and sort of dialogue with that? Now, sleep research tells us, I'm 80, and they say by the time we're 80, we'll have spent 6 years of our life dreaming. Think of that, 6 years out of 80 years in the dream state. And most time people don't remember. Now, there's a lot of evidence to suggest, nature doesn't waste energy, so it's serving purposes. And one of its purposes, I think, is to metabolize the massive stimuli that come at us in any 24 hours. And if we are not allowed to do that, we feel unrested, irritable, restless, etc. But in addition, it makes a qualitative response to our life, and that's significant. So I think the deep psyche has two agendas. The first is our continued growth and development, because if we're not growing and developing, then there's something in us that's already dying. And secondly, self healing. It's seeking the restoration of some homeostasis within us. It's seeking our inner balance when the world around us is unbalanced. And also is this issue of meaning. If something means something, really means something to you, it's worth your sacrifice. It's worth the cost you pay. Many times people have had to sacrifice profoundly for things that mattered. And even the people we would value in history didn't have easy lives or comfortable lives. We wouldn't want to trade with their lives, but because something was meaningful, they lived it, they embodied it, they stuck it out, they fought their way through it. And that's why they are exemplars of the meaning of this journey. I can't manufacture meaning. The world can say, if you buy this house, marry this person, drive this car, your life is going to be rich and meaningful. Well, if that worked, we'd have plenty of evidence to see it all around us. So
Well, usually
it
it's
doesn't work.
sold, usually it's just sold as happiness. It's not, they don't usually talk about rich and meaningful, unfortunately, but it's
That's
usually
right.
just selling happiness, right?
That's right. That's right. Well, what we need are little happiness stands every block, and you can just pop in there and buy some more happiness because, you know, I I'm known for saying happiness is not that important, but meaning is everything.
Yeah.
Because the goal of life, as I was just saying, many of the people that we would most value in our lives or in history weren't happy, but they had meaningful journeys. And people say, well, what's wrong with happiness? Well, nothing's wrong with it. I'm not against happiness. Happiness is a momentary experience of being in right relationship with your own psyche at that moment, but it's transient. You know, if you're thirsty, you can be happy with a glass of fresh water. You know, too much water, you drown. It's like so much is transitory and contextual. And if I'm happy at any given moment, if I can build myself an island where I'm happy, that means I have to shut off the fact that just down the block is a hospital with people suffering. And over in this direction, there are people suffering in enormous injustices. So, am I going to isolate myself from the real world as it is to buy some sort of phantasmal happiness? I don't think so.
Mhm.
Happiness means you're doing something that you feel that is meaningful to you. It resonates for you, and from time to time, it makes you very happy. You know,
Yeah.
like writing a book. Writing is not easy. People think it's
No.
very easy. It's not easy. I write at the end of a long work day,
Mm.
and when I'm tired, I like to turn on the television and watch the news or a ball game or something like that. No, there's something in me that is wanting expression. You know, I don't do it for money. There's not that much money in it. You know, it's like this wants expression through you. So when I do that, I find myself experiencing happiness that comes out of that, even though it's, I would say, hard labor.
Mhm. I guess one of the things that's difficult for people when we present this idea of listening to your inner guidance is it can be hard for them to make a discernment. So you talked about how the soul will be critiquing our life and our actions.
Mhm,
How do we separate that out from an inner critic voice that may have its origins in our childhood? How
mhm.
do we know who we're talking to in any given moment?
That's a profound question, and there again is discernment. That's an old-fashioned word, but we need to bring it back into play again. Discernment means sorting and sifting, sorting and sifting. And there is no one who doesn't have internal voices of denigration that are working. And sometimes they are so powerful, they dominate a person's life and they keep sabotaging themselves or serving something that will never achieve what is important for them to do in their life. I mean, for example, if a client or if an individual has had a parent who is denigrating them all the time, and it happens too often, all their life, they either serve that message through self sabotage and avoidance, or they're caught in overcompensation. I have to prove myself against that, you see. When we have a powerful message to us, and it can come to us from cultural forms like racism, sexism, etc., like that, or it can come out of the family of origin or specific events in our social setting, I have three choices. I can obey that and serve it. And that's what produces repetition. Remember that saying, this isn't working for me, but I do it very well. That's what leads to these self destructive patterns. Secondly, I'm going to run from it, get as far away as I can. I call that the Seattle solution, unless the person lives in Seattle, and then we'll call it the Miami solution. It's like, let me just get away from mom and dad. You know, I'll be anything but like my mother. I won't live my father's life. Well, I'm still being defined by the other rather than what wants expression from within. Or thirdly, we're out there trying to fix it in some way. A life of distraction, a life of busyness. Don't look back, something might be gaining, as Satchel Paige once said. Or if you're really troubled, you can become a therapist and work with other people who have that problem, you see. Because often in the sort of psychic architecture of professional caregivers, of clergy and nurses and physicians and psychotherapists, social workers, so forth, is they were often a very sensitive child who felt the disorders of their family
Hmm.
and got identified with trying to sort of provide that homeostasis. And of course, they can't fix mom and dad, but they get very locked into that mode of adapting their own soul's agenda to that. And so I would go so far as to say that half of people in the helping professions shouldn't be there because they're pushed there by that dynamic, and half should be because that's their calling. And there's virtually no effort, unfortunately, in the training of professional caregivers to really sort through that and examine that, to sort out that motive. And that's one reason there's so much burnout and there's so much distress that goes on among professional caregivers. Because once again, they're sacrificing their own journey to sort of take care of someone else. And it's not even a choice, it's a kind of an iron compulsion given the circumstances of their birth. One of the chapters I have in the new book, Prisms, which is coming out, is on the archetype of the wounded healer.
Yeah,
And
that's what I was bringing to mind. I was going to ask you about Chiron and the wounded healer. So please.
yeah, yeah. And the wounded healer means, and that's in all of us, even if you're not in the overt healing professions. There's a part in us that's always trying to fix the other, because if they're there for, if they're okay, then we can relax, and maybe they can be there for us in a better way. You know, a lot of children get locked into that. So even if they're not a professional caregiver, maybe they program computers or whatever they're doing, they're still caught in that old need to fix the other. And I can say, as a therapist, we never fix anybody else. We can help work with the issues. We can identify some of the stuck places. We can deal with some of the compelling fears, et cetera, et cetera. But in the end, it's a self-healing process. So you can see, under normal circumstances, in most people, there's some part that is trying to fix the other, and we can't do that. Now, many a relationship, as we know, an intimate relationship, a loving relationship, is founded on this principle that if I can get you fixed all right, then you'll be there as that genuinely warm and reciprocal person that I'd like to spend my life with, you see.
Hmm.
Well, seldom does that work very well, because we can't fix the other, you know?
Yeah. 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 It's interesting. I'm just kind of like, I have to I have to digest your books. I can only read a chapter at a time, and I'm finding talking to you, I actually want to leave space to digest, but I realize that
Mhm,
I'm
mhm.
conducting an interview here, so I have to kind of
I
snap
understand.
myself out.
Well, that's funny, because I write short books, and
Thank God.
as these things are so concentrated for me, and many people have said I sometimes can just read a paragraph at a time, or a page, and then I have to stop and think about it. Well, that's wonderful. Do stop and think about it.
Yeah.
If this doesn't help you make sense of your life, don't bother. Go find something that does. If it happens to speak to your life, here's a total stranger describing things that may cast light on your relationships or how you keep shooting yourself in the foot. If that's the case, why, take it very seriously. You might learn something from that. And even if it's one sentence from a book, that can be life changing.
Hmm.
I've certainly experienced that myself.